Here I have 5 different bebop melodies, 5 different bebop heads. I think these are good to learn. It can kind of help you understand the jazz language, to unlock the mystery of jazz. So they each have something about them that is gonna shed some light on this mystery called jazz language. So let's just get right into it, shall we? Let's start with Bloomdido. So this is a bebop blues with slightly different changes. That's just a generic backing track I found online. I'll put these in the description below. So what do we learn from this? Well, it's the kind of Charlie Parker, the offbeat. But the most unusual thing about this is, instead of going to G7 before the C minor, he plays a D flat minor or a C sharp, like a half step above. So we have B flat. Then I think it's a 2-5 there, but instead of a quick change, I think it's a 2-5 back to B flat. And then we have E flat 7, E flat minor 7, which is kind of common. So if you play C sharp Dorian there, it's like a half step above, it's like a chromatic approach. Let's just try to do that. Just blues stuff. Minor. C sharp here. You see this quite often in jazz, that there's a blues or a rhythm changes tune, but the actual melody is very different, like different chords and even a different form, and then it just says soloing over a regular blues, like a regular jazz blues or regular rhythm changes. Here you have the option, you could solo over these chord changes, or you could play a regular jazz blues. If you play it as a regular jazz blues, that means that you can kind of imply that C sharp minor there. So if your playing is strong, it's not going to clash, even if the piano player is playing a G7 and you're playing this. And if you're playing with good musicians, they kind of, with big ears, they're going to kind of pick up on what you're doing. And it makes sense to kind of imply that harmony, even if it's not there. Then, let's say you're on a gig and you're playing a blues and all of a sudden somebody else starts to imply that. If you know this tune, you'll recognize, aha, it's that half step above thing. So learning tunes like this will kind of help you to recognize what that sounds like. So I have made a few videos in the past on like jazz blues heads and rhythm changes heads and all this, and I always ask if there's something I forget, and somebody mentioned this tune Bloomdido, and yeah, this is another one you need to know. So here you have it. So the next tune is Butch and Butch from, where it's by Oliver Nelson. There is also an intro to this tune and an outro, and the real book that I've seen this chart in the real book, it's completely wrong. I think these are the chords, so I'll loop them. So C sharp minor 7 flat 5, C minor 7, G over B, B flat over E, right? To C over D. And here in the second time it's F sharp 13 flat 9. And then this A flat over D, and the whole thing ends with this chord, F sharp over G. So the arranging on this album that this is on, it's from an album called The Blues and the Abstract Truth, I think. It's one of the best jazz albums, I think, in existence. You really need to check out that album if you haven't. It's got all these great musicians on it. Bill Evans is on it. And the arrangements are really sophisticated. So there's more to it than this. There's like harmonies and other horns are playing other stuff. But so it's also, again, we have a blues form with all these other chords added to it. So when you're soloing, you're blowing on regular blues in G. If you follow my channel, you recognize this chord progression. It's a sophisticated kind of version of the chord progression that we find in a lot of Cole Porter tunes that I've been looking at lately. So you see how it all connects. Just one thing here is that the D7 at the end, this is something I like to point out, that it's one of those things that the jazz theory book doesn't tell you, that there's a D7 alter going back to its root. The theory book tells you to play altered, but this is G kind of blues pentatonic. I think it's often forgotten that you can play that over this chord. Just play G blues. It's a good example of that. So this, though, we're gonna take this phrase at least this. That's something we can use over rhythm changes. So if I transpose that to B flat, that works over rhythm changes. So if I have a good old rhythm changes progression, so 1 6 2 5. Play this. Why? Because rhythm changes can be many things. It doesn't have to be. It could be this. B flat with D, E flat, E diminished. Or it could be this, B flat, B diminished, which is kind of G7, C minor, C sharp diminished, which is the same as the E diminished we had just a second ago, which also kind of leads back to D minor. So the progression could be this. D minor, G, C minor, B flat, B dim, C minor, C sharp dim, and then this So one important thing to understand about rhythm changes, and one of the reasons why jazz musicians love to play that, is that there isn't just one set of chord changes that you can use. You can mix and match between different ones. And if you're playing if you're treating the thing like this, and the bass player is playing something else, and the piano player is something else, it kind of doesn't matter. But you don't want to be too obvious in your comping. You want to leave it open so that the soloist can so it's not dictated by the rhythm section. And you hear people do this all the time. So that's an A triad. The A triad is hiding in that diminished scale, which means that if you play this chord progression, B flat, D, B flat over D, E flat, you could play an A chord, which leads back to B flat or D minor. Right? So that's why that A triad works there. That's something I like to do when if you play tunes like in gypsy jazz, you play like I Can't Give You Anything But Love. At the end it's like C sharp diminished to G to E. A lot of tunes have this, old jazz tunes have this progression. So let's say you're soloing over C sharp diminished, G over D, E7, A minor, and G. So I'm playing an F sharp triad over the C sharp diminished. So I want to take a moment to mention something that I don't mention that often. Is I really appreciate my patrons. So if you want all these PDFs, by the way, you can become a member on Patreon. And I appreciate the support. It's what keeps the lights on, is that how you say it? Yeah, I really appreciate it. So why should you learn tunes, by the way? So you want to be that kind of musician that know a lot of tunes for many reasons. As I said, like each of these tunes can teach you something. Hopefully you noticed that already, that can kind of use the knowledge that you get from the tunes in your playing. But then there's the more pragmatic, reason, like, you become a better musician if you know a lot of tunes. So you don't have to rehearse, you don't have to look at music. I personally don't like when I'm up on stage and I have to read. I mean, sometimes you have to, I do it too. But I prefer situations where I know the tunes and everybody in the band knows the tunes from memory. So I find you play differently. You play better if you know the music. And I also don't appreciate when I go to concerts and the musicians are reading. And again, of course, sometimes you have to do that, and I understand that. But yeah, it's just something about reading music. It's not part of the jazz tradition. Of course, you can't know every bebop tune. It's impossible, but some people know a lot of tunes, and that's why those are considered good musicians. You become a popular musician if you go to a jam or a gig and people ask, do you know this tune? And you're like, yeah. What about this one? Yeah, know that one. As opposed to, no, I don't know though. No, I don't know any tunes. The next one is kind of similar. It's called Serpent's Tooth, so it's kind of rhythm changes, but not really. And it has this phrase. So it's kind of similar, right?
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
bridge. Here again we have this ascending. It's a little bit different with D7 going to E flat and E flat minor. But basically it's kind of rhythm changes, but the bridge is different. Again, have that A triad. E flat melodic minor. Sub 5 to 4. This is another thing you see often, like leaving the bridge open for blowing, so there's no melody, it's just chord changes. Before we get to the last one that is more of a modern tune, there's one more here called CTA, and I did Google what that stands for. Right now I can't remember. So it's by Jimmy Heath, and this is also another example of how you can play completely different chord changes over rhythm changes. Here it's descending. So instead of, it's going down. And then the bridge is regular rhythm changes. So I think I'll play these chords, I'll loop these chords. So here we have this. So you could play the melody an octave higher. And then there's another melody under it. It's, if you want to bring that out, you have to play it higher, I think, like in a higher register, otherwise it just gets kind of obscured. So the melody on top is, and the second melody is just chromatically. It's kind of cool. And there's the harmony for that. It kind of works, it's a little bit low. They do those kind of horn things. I don't know how you do that. The B section, right, is this kind of thing, like a Hendrix D to a G13 to C Hendrix chord. You get this chromatic movement. I remember the first tune I learned that thing was Spinning Wheel. We played that in high school. It was Spinning Wheel. By Blood, Sweat and Tears, right? So again, you could use this approach when you're playing over a regular rhythm changes. Let's just try that for a second. So if I do like a more conventional rhythm changes. So see how I'm kind of adding these things to my repertoire, like kind of like licks that you can throw in. Okay, so that was that. Now we have this one left, which is a more modern, I guess it's from the 80s, late 80s maybe. So it's Suspone. So this is Suspone by, I think it's by Mike Stern, but it's from a Michael Brecker album called Don't Try This at Home, I think. He released a few albums in the 80s. Yeah, it's gotta be the 80s. And I used to listen to those a lot. That's kind of my transitioning from listening to fusion into more straight ahead jazz, because those albums he made there with Mike Stern and Pat Metheny is another one. They're kind of jazz, straight ahead jazz, but there's like a fusion element to it. So this is, I want to remember that the liner note says it's kind of a parody of Bebop. So a parody made with love, I'm sure. So here you don't want to play the chords too kind. You have to be kind of open. So let's just do a bass line. By the way, the Mike Stern solo on that recording is pretty killing. So here is now we have entered into a more modern territory. So there's all sorts of harmonic techniques here, so it's hard to say where they derived this kind of the scales and everything from. Same thing, Mike Stern and also John Scofield. It's like they made bebop into an upgraded version of bebop. So there's a lot of symmetrical diminished, but you know, it could be either half whole. Those notes belong to F, I guess. But this, I guess they're treating it like half whole. Maybe, but I don't even know. Could also be whole half. Here, those notes are from B flat whole half, like diminished. Or maybe they're just thinking like some kind of blues. So it's a mix of different symmetrical diminished things, and then with traditional bebop language, chromaticism, and blues. D landing on the kind of funny extensions, landing on that tritone. And this last surrounding the major 7 on the dominant chord doesn't even make sense. But it sounds hit, but if you were comping just kind of normal, it wouldn't sound good. So you have to, when you play this kind of more modern stuff, you have to be more, how should I put it? You don't want to get in the way of the melody. You also have to understand where those notes are coming from. So if you know that, then you can throw in chords from those scales. Maybe something like that, or at least imply more broken kind of harmony, and rhythmically broken as well. It's not ding 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 ding. So that's a more modern bebop tune. So I would encourage you to kind of learn these, but if you don't know them already, and try to incorporate the ideas from these heads into soloing over blues and rhythm changes, and treat them as kind of licks, and that you build your vocabulary on. So let me know if there are more bebop heads that you think I should consider that I have talked about here. And as always, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.